Pokemon has a ton of different mechanics. Many are pretty straightforward, but there are a lot of weird interactions that are unintuitive, unexpected, or straight up don't make sense. Today, I'm going to be going over the most confusing interactions in Pokemon, not to be confused with confusion mechanics. Shout out to some of the folks in the 35 Pokes Discord for helping me brainstorm for this video. Now without further ado, some of the oddities of Pokemon interactions. For the first interaction, I'm going with one that most of you have probably never seen involving Normalize. Normalize is the signature ability of Delcatty which makes all of its moves normal type, including status moves. As such, it can do weird things like paralyze ground types with Thunder Wave because Thunder Wave becomes a normal type move. However, things get weird with ghost types. As you might guess, normal type Thunder Wave doesn't affect ghosts. Makes sense. However, normal type Toxic does affect ghost types. Why? I have no idea. It honestly feels akin to some kind of Gen 1 glitch that was never patched out. It's a niche interaction that only comes up with Delcatty, which Normalize using Toxic on ghost types, so it's possible that no one in Game Freak ever even knew. But if this is intentional, then this interaction is truly inexplicable. The next interaction is pretty straightforward. Encore doesn't work on Dynamax Cannon. This is an interaction that comes up here and there and has boggled a lot of people in the past few years. Why does Encore not work on Dynamax Cannon? The truth is, nobody knows. Encore works just fine against moves like Behemoth's Blade and Eterna Beam, but Dynamax Cannon? Not allowed. Dynamax Cannon is also the only regular one-turn attack that can't be selected by Sleep Talk. Clearly something weird is going on with how Dynamax Cannon was coded, so be advised. Do not try to Encore Eternatus with your Whimsicott.
Oh my god, he has headphones on! He can't hear us! Oh my god!
Picture this. You want to make a gimmick team designed around activating your own Pokemon's abilities Defiant and Competitive. So you devise a strategy where first you set up Sticky Web, then send out Cinderace to court change the Sticky Web back onto your side of the field. Then you send out your Defiant Pokemon and...
Defiant ability. What's going to happen is that after we get the drop from Sticky Webs, we're going to get a Defiant boost right here. And, wait. Did I not get Defiant?
The ability doesn't activate. This used to work, but it was patched out during Gen 8. But this is where things get even stranger. In Gen 9, the interaction was brought back, so your own Sticky Web can activate Defiant. In fact, I didn't even realize this until I was getting some B-roll in Showdown, and it just worked. I had an entire explanation as to why it worked that way, but I guess Game Freak changed their mind, so now I have no explanation. As it turns out, trying to explain Pokemon logic is a fool's errand. Next up is one that a lot of people find unintuitive, the interaction between pivot moves and pivot items/abilities. The item in question is the eject button, which switches out the holder immediately upon being hit by a damaging move. The ability Emergency Exit does the same thing, but only when the move puts Golisopod under half health. The confusing part about these two things is that they will both cancel the pivoting effect of U-turn, Volt Switch, or Flip Turn upon activation. The reason for this is that the items and abilities will always activate before the secondary effect of the move. When a damaging move is executed, first the damage is applied, then items and abilities are checked for activation, and only after that are certain secondary effects executed. For example, let's say your low health Pokemon uses Knockoff on something holding a Rocky Helmet. First, Knockoff does damage. Next, the Rocky Helmet activates, and let's say that recoil is enough to KO the Knockoff user. The secondary effect of Knockoff will then be cancelled because the user was KO'd, meaning the Rocky Helmet never gets removed. In the same vein, Rapid Spin won't remove hazards if the spinner gets KO'd by something like Rocky Helmet or Iron Barbs first. The same kind of logic applies to switching moves. The switching effect is the secondary part of the move. Also, it makes sense that the switching effect doesn't go after the eject button, otherwise the item would be terrible. Why would you risk using an item that can prevent you from attacking and losing momentum? The same holds for Emergency Exit, which is already a hindrance to Golisopod as is. It doesn't make perfect sense, but I think the interaction makes enough sense as is. Besides, pivot moves are already incredibly powerful, so any bit of counterplay to them is nice to have. I've saved the best for last. The king of working in weird, unintuitive ways, Sheer Force. Sheer Force is most well known for synergizing particularly well with Life Orb, but it does a bunch of other weird things too. Keep in mind that the following interactions only occur if the Sheer Force user goes for a move that's boosted by Sheer Force. For example, neither Eject Button nor Emergency Exit will activate if hit by a Sheer Force move. In fact, all of these things that would usually activate a hit by a normal move just don't happen if a Sheer Force move is used instead. This is because all of these things are considered secondary effects and are therefore bypassed. However, there's also a ton of things that seem like they should be affected by Sheer Force but aren't. Examples of this include Knockoff, Recoil moves, and Scale Shot, which all behave as usual despite all having what could be considered a secondary effect. Scale Shot is especially weird because other speed boosting moves like Trailblaze are affected by Sheer Force. Despite the simple description of the ability, the implementation feels like sheer insanity. Sorry, that was a little forced. Well, that wraps up my list. If any of these confused you to begin with, hopefully you understand these interactions a little better now. Alternatively, you may have been blissfully unaware of all of this nonsense and are now more confused than when you started watching this. Either way, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care.